How many of you studied the Holocaust? Fair amount of you, right? Abdullah has been to Auschwitz, went on a trip. There's a professor I have at Columbia. His name is Gil Anijar. That's his book, Semites. It's really technical, so unless you really like academic writing, just let me summarize it for you, and you will be happy. He asked me once, he said to me, Haroon, why do you think more German Jews didn't leave Germany in the 30s? What do you mean? He says, it was pretty clear. He himself is Jewish. He's from Western Europe. He says, it was pretty clear to anyone who was paying attention that Hitler was an anti-Semite. His full plans hadn't been realized in the 30s, but it was pretty clear where he wanted to take Germany. And maybe many people or most people couldn't imagine the extent of what he was going to do, but anyone who was paying attention would be very uneasy, to say the least, that this guy was now in power. Even other Western European leaders were very suspect of him well before the war started. And he pointed out to me something very interesting. He said, many German Jews didn't think of themselves as Jewish. Because in their mind, Jewishness was a religious marker that belonged to people who were Orthodox Jews. And they were fully Germanized, right? Many of them had converted to Christianity. Many of them were completely fluent in German culture and practices and middle class or upper middle class life. They were part of the culture. Everything was, in every way you could imagine, they were totally integrated. It's the same thing that happened in Bosnia, where you had many people who were Muslim, right, in a secular sense. They were not religious, they were not necessarily practicing. Many of them were intermarried with Serbs or Croats, right? But their Muslimness was nevertheless a marker, but they didn't take it seriously because they didn't live their lives as religiously Muslim. But nevertheless, something happened along the way where race and religion got confused. And I want you to keep this in mind also, because race and religion when it comes to Muslims are always confused. And a point that he makes in this book that you should always take whenever you analyze the news, whenever people talk about race, they're often also talking about religion. And whenever people talk about religion, they're often also talking about race. You see what I mean? Many times conversations go on and on about religion, there's a subtext of race in there. And many times when people are talking about race, the subtext is religion. And keep that in mind. Now, at the same time, I'm about to disagree with myself, which I can do because I'm me and you don't have a choice. Ann Coulter said after 9/11 we should invade their countries, kill their leaders, and convert them to Christianity. If you don't remember that and you just read it, you probably hate your life right now. Ethnic suffering is neither random nor impersonal, and here's the most important point, nor avoidable through changes in identity or voluntary commitments. This is why Islamophobia is not racism. That's Sherman Jackson, who wrote the book, among many other books, Islam and the Problem of Black Suffering. He has a point here, that if you are being discriminated against because of your race or ethnic identity, you can't change that, right? If someone's going to hate on you because you're brown, like you're Desi, you can't pretend to be not brown, right? Like you can't get away with that. It's just not going to happen. Some people have tried. It's usually embarrassing. But the point is that you can't get away with it. Sometimes you're like, oh, you know, I'm actually Italian, right? So then you end up on Jersey Shore, so that doesn't do anything for anyone. Don't make fun of the show. It's very valuable anthropologically. One day, historians are going to look at the show and be like, wow, we learned so much about the culture. This is really important to think about. And I'm not trying to say this to diminish the reality of discrimination based on religion, but the fact that Ann Coulter can say we should convert them to Christianity means that once they become Christian, they're okay, right? There are a lot of people on the Islamophobic circuit who are former Muslims, as they call themselves, right? You can't be formerly Desi, right? You can't be formerly white. Like, you are what you are. That's an ethnic marker, a racial marker. You can't change that. A religious marker can be changed. So if they stop being Muslim, then they're acceptable. See what I'm saying? That doesn't mean that I 100% buy that everyone who says that doesn't have a racial component to their language, but it's still part of what's going on. If you look at some of the language about white Americans who convert to Islam, they're seen as somehow betraying their cultural identity. And there's something important here because in many ways the hysteria about Islam is kind of like the hysteria about communism in the 50s and 60s. Communism was not limited to one race, right? The Russians were communists, but so were the Chinese, and so were the Vietnamese, and so were the Cubans. And the North Koreans, right? And a lot of other folks. So there was something subversive in communism that made it dangerous, that transcended race or ethnic identity, and made communists especially dangerous because they were hard to pick out. And this is where, nevertheless, Islam is racialized, even though it's not in a racist way. And I want you to think about this, because the definition of racialized thinking or discriminatory thinking is that any one person from a category is similar to everyone else. So all Muslims look the same, sound the same, act the same, smell the same. We often do smell the same. If you travel to Muslim-majority countries, like there's that same Muslim smell. I don't know what it is, but for those of you who traveled, you know it's true. This is great that this is being taped, right? So most of the things I say are jokes. You can laugh. It's okay. Islam is seen as homogenous, as really similar. And it's in two ways. One, Islam is really aggressive. And two, Islam is not a religion. Edward Said writes in the book Orientalism that there have been biases against Muslims for a long time. And a lot of these have had to do with the fact that nobody knew how to classify Islam as a religion. For a long time, Islam was seen as a heresy, not a proper religion. Right? Judaism and Christianity were religions. Islam was something else. Because the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was seen as, viewed as the disseminator of a false revelation. Also from this summer, you could even argue whether being a Muslim is actually a religion. Being a Muslim cannot be a religion, because your being a Muslim is not a religion. But anyway, that's academic. Or is it a nationality, way of life, cult, whatever you want to call it? Tennessee Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey on July 14th, 2010. And I would argue that one of the confusing problems here is that Islam doesn't fit into categories that people are used to. It's very important to understand this, because people can't fit Islam into a category. They don't know what to make of it. Is it a race? Is it a religion? Is it a nationality? Is it a political ideology? Of course, Islam is not a religion. What do you get from that? What's the advantage to saying Islam is not a religion? No credibility. Think beyond that.
Not constitutionally protected.
Thank you. Nice. Made up for the one of them comment. It's not constitutionally protected. If you're not following a religion, I can go after you, because you can't claim First Amendment rights. That whatever thing you think that is that you're doing in the mosque every day, that's not a religion. That's a cult or a nationality or a way of life. I don't know what the difference between way of life and religion is, right? The guy sounds like a Pakistani talking about Islam. Islam is not a religion, it's a way of life. So secretly Ron Ramsey's a Muslim, and this is how we're going to take him down. Like, you were one of us, and you're going down with us. No, see, you should use your stigma to your advantage. Just accuse everyone else of being Muslim too. So this is why in places in Europe now, there is an attack on public symbols of religion, because the way in which we are taught to think of religion is that it is either private or it's public. And if it's private, it's okay, and if it's public, it's not okay, right? So anything you do that marks you publicly as a member of a religion becomes problematic if you see public and private as mapping out over sacred and secular. Does that make sense? Yes? Yes. I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay, good. This is why in France now, if you are under 18 and you go to public school, you cannot wear hijab. You also can't wear a kippah, yarmulke, and if you're a Sikh, you cannot wear a turban, and you cannot wear a large or prominent cross. But with all due respect, there is no religious incumbency for a Christian to wear a large cross, right? It's not part of any sort of obligatory tradition or practice. But if you are Jewish or Sikh or Muslim, you cannot wear your religion on yourself, because it is seen as somehow unfairly and unethically distinguishing you from other people. So, actually, there's a really cool story I'm going to tell you about this. So, this was passed, and a fair number of French Muslim women tried like a bunch of different ways to get around this. They wore bandanas. Some of them wore headscarves, like the French flag as a headscarf, which is not too different from what she's doing right now. Some of them actually shaved their head, because then they wouldn't show their hair. But they were not allowed to come up with alternate forms of headgear. So some of them wore like beanies, like hats for winter and stuff like that. That was not allowed. So in the end, the majority of them unveiled, because the only option you have is to, well, you have two. You can not go to school, which most imams and community leaders in France have decided is not a good idea, or you go to private school. But if you go to private school, you have to have, right, money, and the French Muslim community in general is not wealthy. Then recently in France, they banned the face veil, niqab, saying that if you're wearing the niqab in public, and there's probably a few hundred women in France who wear niqab, you can be fined. And it's like 250 euros if you are caught publicly wearing a headscarf. So they now have morality police in France. So anytime anyone gives you a point about morality police in the Muslim world, you can just flip it around and it becomes like an interesting conversation. So a French businessman of Algerian descent, really wealthy guy, went up to parliament the day the law against the burqa was passed with a huge, you know, those like giant-sized checks, like celebration, like donation to something. He went up with a check for €1 million of his own money, and he said, I will pay the first €1 million worth of fines that any woman who wears niqab gets. So from a PR point of view, it was really powerful, because he was kind of like, all right, go ahead and fine. Like, I'll just be paying him for it, you know? So that was kind of interesting. All right. So for those of you who've seen these pictures 10, 20, or like Forrest 35,000 times, I apologize, but that's your fault for coming here. I still love you. He doesn't love me. There's no response.
I love you too, brother.
Nice. See that? That was awesome, right? Eventually it comes out. I want to be totally honest with you. I think that this kind of language and rhetoric is going to keep increasing. I'm not saying this, one, because I'm trying to teach you how to fight back, so I'm selling myself. And I'm not telling you this just to be a downer. I'm telling you this because I think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen for a lot of reasons, but one of the most prominent reasons is Obama's re-election in 2012. It's already very clear that the latest tactic or target is the word Sharia and what it represents. And after Oklahoma, there are now, I believe, but I could be wrong, measures to ban Sharia in 13 states across America. So this is a wedge issue that's used to excite a certain base and to get them motivated in the run-up to the 2012 elections and to push back. On the upside, a lot of people in the Democratic Party have actually begun to understand how this is being used and are putting a fair amount of resources into working with Muslim and other organizations, social justice organizations, civil rights organizations, into pushing back because they recognize that whatever their own personal views, this is going to hurt Obama and therefore their own party. So it's not a case where we're simply left to be basically punched around with no one to help us, but it is nevertheless a case where this stuff is going to keep coming. And I think it's really important to think about this because for a lot of you, if you are at Duke or you're part of this community, you have access to a lot of amazing resources, right? You have access to some amazing experiences and some very cool people. You therefore have a certain level of confidence in your identity and your culture that people who are younger than you may not have. And this is really important to focus on because if you are 20, 30 years old, older than that, you have a memory of different periods of American history. But if you're coming up as a kid in a period where all you're seeing is your culture and identity being bashed publicly, and Islam has never been attacked this way in a long time in the United States, if this is all you're seeing, it's very easy to become cynical and angry and alienated. And I think it's important to recognize this because we have to do whatever we can to prevent our community from falling into that, because the minute you fall into that trap, you cease to become active politically and socially, and when you cease to become active politically and socially, the discrimination continues. Because no one's pushing back, you are an easy target. And if you're an easy target, if people can keep scoring points off of you, then they're not going to stop, because if it's an easy way to get votes or get elected or just get media attention, why would someone stop? And the pictures I'm going to show you, and again, apologies for those of you who've seen them before, are from an ad campaign very recently, or a series of ad campaigns across Western Europe. And while there are significant differences between Western Europe and the United States, nevertheless, these are all Western societies. These are societies where we take certain rights to be inherently part of our identity as people in a democracy. Nevertheless, when you look at these ads and you consider what the kind of image they're selling, it's really important to understand what it's doing and the fact that this is going both ways. That a lot of the stuff that's coming out of Europe is influencing people in America, and a lot of the stuff that's coming out of America is influencing people in Europe. So there is a connection across the ocean, so to speak.